Next up is the turning point for the left-hander, and for this one I would recommend using the end of the curbing here, and when the car is right at the end of the right side curb, right around here, that is the place where you want to start to turn in, and then go all the way to the inside here of the corner. Just make sure that you don't hit the curb. The curb basically negates the effect of the banking. This corner has a bit of banking, and you want to use the effect of the banking, and by running the curb you basically negate the effect of it. You have less overall vertical load on the tires, less grip, you can carry less speed, and it's overall just not as good. Then for this corner, I would recommend keeping third gear. And when you're right in the center of the corner, at the lowest point here, in this sort of small valley here, that's the place where you want to pick up the throttle, pretty much immediately up to 100% here, and let the traction control do its thing. And then at the exit, try to use a little bit of the curbing if need be, but be careful, there's a gravel trap pretty much right behind it, and if you hit the gravel here, it will slow you down quite immensely. And from this point onwards, then just immediately move the car over to the left-hand side again, so you have the straightest possible braking zone then for turn 12. Is turn 12, and unfortunately for turn 12,
2654. We're like inching our way through this tutorial. Let's see, is it turn 12 in the tutorial? Let's go back to the data pack. Let's look here. Let's try to catch up to this point. Jeez. It's weird how like the numbering on Race Labs and the numbering on VRS is completely different. Jeez. Oy, oy, oy. got off track with that. Salvageable. Oof. All right, that's enough for that sector. Whew. Oops. That's not what I meant to click. All right, 26:54 in the tutorial. Making our way through it.
Welcome to the video tutorial for the Porsche 963 GTP at Le Mans. Le Mans is one of the tracks 12, and unfortunately for turn 12 there is no brake marker available from my side. I purely do it by feel, and unfortunately if I look for a brake marker here visually, I can't find anything. On the right hand side, the distinct marker here with the pocket in the guardrail is already long gone. That is unusable. Other than that, on the right-hand side, I can't find anything usable. Nothing that lines up with a fender, antenna line, anything else. On the left-hand side, there's also nothing. There is no 100 board. There's a 50 board, but that would be way too late. As you see here, if you break at this point here, it's way too late. So I unfortunately can't give you any visual reference point. I just purely do it by feel. What could potentially work, now that I look a little bit more closely at it, if the 50 board lines up vertically pretty well with the beginning of the left front fender, that could work as a reference point, but I personally don't use it at all. I just do it by feel. However, what I can tell you is how hard you should brake and what line you should pick. And I would recommend placing the left side tires as closely as possible to the white line here. And don't go past the white line as you can do in some other cars. In GT cars, I think it's quite popular to place the left side tires onto the red painted tarmac and then basically take the curb in the center of the car. So basically left side tires are on the left hand side of the curb, right side tires.
I'll grab some water. I'll be right back. Okay.
On the right hand side of the curb, I guess you get the idea. and then go over the curb on corner entry. In this car, I think it is not a practically usable approach, because the car will just bounce when going over the curb, and you have a much higher chance of locking the left front tire, and if that happens, you will go straight as well. So what I would recommend doing is just breaking a straight line here, as shown here. Place the left side tires a little bit onto the curbing, but not all the way. And then the next cue here for you would be the cone, and as soon as the front of the car is right next to the singular cone here, which is also visible in the cockpit view, well, not visible anymore, but I guess you get the idea, right around here when you're next to the cone, drop the car into first gear, and then start to turn in pretty much immediately at this point here. And as soon as you feel a significant amount of steering lock, also drop the brake pressure really aggressively in order to not lock the right front tire. Then down to first gear, and try to get as close to the inside curbing here as possible, but don't hit it. This curbing here, especially the inside edge of it, is incredibly steep and will unsettle the car quite heavily. So I would not recommend using this one. What I would recommend doing is clipping the curb a tiny little bit, so maybe half a tire width or so of curbing can be used. Any more than that is, in my opinion, not very usable anymore. And pretty much when you're on the curbing here with the right side tires, and pretty much right at the apex of the corner, that's a place where you want to pick up the throttle again, more or less initially up to 50, 55% or so, and then very smoothly increasing it as you unwind the steering wheel. And at the exit, you can basically track out all the way here. The curbing here is the maximum that I would go. The AstroTurf on the left-hand side, left to the curb, is a little bit more slippery, and the traction control will intervene a little bit more, and it will cost you straight line speed if you place the left side tires on the AstroTurf. So this is the maximum that I would go. Any further than that is a terrible idea in my opinion. And from that point onwards, another straight coming up. In this case here, just keeping the car in the left side lane, as shown here. Going through the gears, not all that spectacular. And then placing the car as far to left-hand side as possible and as close to the AstroTurf as you can prior to the turn-in phase for turn 13-14. Important here is also that you don't need to shift up. The car is pretty much right at the ref limiter, but shifting up doesn't really give you any benefit, at least when driving alone and with a lot of fuel. In low fuel scenarios, or with a different wind direction, or if you're in draft, etc., etc., it might be necessary to shift into 7th. In the data pack conditions here on full fuel, you don't need to, but your mileage may vary, obviously based on ambient conditions. So this is obviously not set in stone. If the car flashes blue at you, then shift up. As simple as that. 13 and turn 14, the entry for the Porsche curves. For this one, you want to focus on the AstroTurf on the left-hand side of the car, and you basically want to place the left side tires onto the AstroTurf here and have the center of the car more or less hovering above the white line. And then the important part here is you want to start to turn in pretty much right after all 4 tires are off of the AstroTurf, and you also want to tap the brake a little bit pretty much as soon as you can't see any of the AstroTurf anymore. So right here you can still see AstroTurf, you can still see it, you can still see it. Now you can't. And that is a place where you want to get out of the throttle and then tap the brake a little bit with about 35% or so peak brake pressure. The target here would be to decelerate the car from give or take 300 kilometers an hour to somewhere around 265 kilometers an hour. That would be the target speed in the dry for the entry of the Porsche curves. Then, when turning in right around here, you want to try to get the right side of the car really close to the end of the dashed line here. So right side tires should be really close to the white line here. And then you want to commit further to the apex of the corner and try to get as close to the inside white line as possible without hitting the curbing on the inside. So if we go a little bit further forward, it should look like this. Right side tires on the white line but not on the curbing. And in terms of getting back onto the throttle, this is also important. I would recommend doing so about 2.5, 3 car lengths before the curbing starts. At this point, you already want to get back towards full throttle, and then try to limit yourself to really low steering wheel angles to not burn up the left front tire. If you overdo it with the steering wheel angle, you will just get more understeer, and you will also destroy the tires here quite heavily, since it's a very fast corner. There's very few corners. I think in iRacing you hit over 260, 270 kilometers an hour in the LMDH cars. And from this point onwards then, keep the car as steady as possible and don't track out too far. I would recommend to have the car in relatively close proximity to the rubber in line, and I would recommend to have about half a car length or so of a gap towards the left side white line. In this case here, I tracked out a little bit further than that. It was still okay, but you have to be a little bit careful here, and then immediately switch directions. The next left-hander here is, in my opinion, flat out if you hit it perfectly. So in this case here, not clipping the curb too much. You only need a tiny little bit of curb usage here, so the first couple millimeters of the curb can be used, or a couple centimeters, but not the full width of it. And then at the exit, you should also be able to take this flat out, get really close to the wall. You can also ride the curb here, but be careful. And then just keep turning to the left-hand side because there's another left-hander immediately coming up. This one requires a small lift, but nothing significant, just down to somewhere around 65% for a short moment. And then keeping the car as far to the left-hand side as possible here, so you don't end up all the way on the right-hand side. What is important here is that you keep right around this area here next to this flex system about half a car width to maybe 3/4 of a car width of a gap between right side tires and the white line. If you're all the way on the right-hand side, you just have to decelerate the car a little bit more than you would have with this line, and it would overall just be a little bit slower. Then the next important point here for turn 15, 16, 17 is the brake marker here for the right-hander. What I personally use as a reference point here is in fact this flex system here and the white line associated with it. And from the cockpit it should look like this. Basically, as soon as I'm next to the flex system right around here, I'm getting out of throttle, tapping the brake again with about 55-60% for a short moment, and then slowing the car down so that the car does not track out here. Important here is that you don't clip the beginning of the curbing here. This curb has a nasty bump right at the beginning, and if you drive over it, the car will bounce around and it might get out of control, so be careful here. So the curbing should not be used initially, at least not the full width of it. The bump is pretty much all the way on the inside here. And then just keep the car next to the white line as much as possible, drive the tightest possible line, and then adjust your trajectory with the throttle. So in this case here, I don't have a set point where I go onto the throttle and by how much, and as you can see, it's quite a wild ride here. I'm just trying to sort of, adjust on the fly the trajectory. If the car tracks out too much, I lift a little bit more. If the car is turning a little bit better than I anticipate, then I give it a little bit more throttle to correct it. And you basically just want to stay on the white line all the way through, and also don't track out at the exit of this corner. It's super important that you stay all the way at the white line on the right hand side, so you have the widest possible entry then for the left-hander, which is the exit of the Porsche curves. And for this one, you only have a small lift, and the sort of switch of direction should happen pretty much in the moment when if you look at the white line here, you see a curvature of the white line, and the white line becomes straight right around this area here, and that is the transition point. From this point onwards, you want to flick the steering wheel really quickly to the left-hand side, as shown here, down to 4th gear. In this case here, I went down to 4th quite early here, so after the initial turn-in, I went down to 4th gear and then adjusted the throttle with it. And then for this next left-hander here, I'm going up to 5th gear again, I think. Yeah, I do. And then lifting to somewhere around 50% throttle for a short moment. And then as smoothly as possible, try to get the car to the inside here. Try to use as much of the blue and yellow curbing, but don't hit the anti-cut sausages here. If you hit the anti-cut sausages, the car will bounce quite badly and you will have an issue at the very end of the corner, at the exit. And from this point onwards then, just try to use minimal steering angle again. The car will be a little bit nervous here sometimes, but it's, I think, in my opinion, it's manageable. And at the exit, try to use a little bit of the curbing here as well, but don't use too much, else you will get a slowdown penalty. What I would recommend using as a guideline is keeping the left side tires on the normal tarmac, right side tires onto the anti-cut sausages, and then you should be safe here. And from this point onwards then, there's a small S section coming. That would be the straight 17 section. We can just play it right here. Nothing.
All right, so let's get through the next two curbs to straight 17, and then we're almost done with this. What are we at? 36:44. This is taking much longer than expected, but it's fine. Learning a difficult track, so guess it comes with the territory. People have different learning styles. This is what I find for teaching myself tracks, so. Worst curves. I think he talked about taking that first one flat. getting towards the end of it.
Whoop.
trying to like understand this section. Let's watch the reference again. Does touch on the things.
They say you cut the course. You'll have to slow down and give up the time gained. cut the course, you've got to slow down and give up that time.
Oops. I meant to like start the new sector there. Not like this. The Porsche curves. Now for the final section of Le Mans. The final countdown. Pounding water like crazy. Or was I in the tutorial video? 36:44.
Welcome to the video tutorial for the Porsche 963 GTP at Le Mans. And at the exit, try to use a little bit of the curbing here as well, but don't, we can just play it right here. Nothing to worry about, easily flat out, just drive between the two apexes and then place the car all the way on the right hand side in preparation then for the fourth chicane, which would be the last couple of corners of the circuit. Then is turn 18, 19 and then 20, 21, the fourth chicane, the last couple of corners here. First of all, with the line that I would approach here is I would place the car as far to the right hand side as possible, but not inside the pit entry. In some of the sort of softer sprung cars, like a GT car, the GTEs, GT3 and just on, you can basically place the right side tires so far to the right hand side that you hit this curbing here and then you have a slightly wider entry for the chicane. In the LMDH or LMP1 or any other really stiffly sprung cars, I wouldn't recommend doing so, as the car is just more bouncy and it doesn't really provide any tangible benefit here. So what I would recommend doing here is just placing the car on the right hand side so that the car is basically just about touching this the flat part of the curbing here, and the car is not upset when going off of the curb, and there's no bouncing and any other disturbing things that the car might do if you use more curbing. Then next up is the brake marker, and for this one what I would recommend doing is using the antenna line right around here and lining it up with this fellow here with orange clothing. And as soon as basically antenna line is past the guy in orange, which is the case right here, you want to get out of the throttle and then hit the brakes for a short moment with 100% peak brake pressure, and then immediately trail off as the speed decreases and downforce decreases. And then the turn-in marker here for me personally is the area where the curb is not double stacked anymore. So right around here you can see, if we go to the chase cam, that the curb has basically 2 lanes, so to speak, and here the second lane ends. And pretty much in that area, when the car is lining up with that, that's the place where I start to turn in. And then for this corner here, I would recommend going down the gears already, down to 4th gear, then clip the apex here quite aggressively, and right at the apex I go down to 3rd gear. So shortly before the apex here, I'm going down to 3rd. And then just try to get the car with the left side of the car as close as possible to this bollard here, and maybe clip the bollard a tiny little bit. So in this case here, the bollard, yeah, it's slightly clipped, but not significantly. Tap the brake again, similar to what you've seen in turn 7 and turn 8 already in the chicanes. When the steering wheel is straight, I'm tapping the brake a little bit again so I can get the car a little bit more slowed down. In this case, I've actually turned in already to the right hand side, which is unintended, but yeah, it shows that I'm also making mistakes with the hand and foot coordination sometimes, so it happens. Then for the next apex, similar deal, try to get really close to the bollard, but don't run over it too much. And then important here, I'm using the throttle a little bit to adjust the trajectory, but you don't want to end up too far to the left hand side. In this case here, my recommendation would be to have about half a car width to maybe a full car width of a gap between right side tires and the white line. Any further to the left will just compromise the entry for the last chicane too much for basically turn 20 and turn 21. Then as soon as the car is more or less straightened again and I have the steering wheel in a straighter position, I'm tapping the brake again with about 50% for a short moment to get the car slowed down a little bit further, and then all the way down to 2nd gear. And then the turning point here is unfortunately a little bit more difficult to find. I don't really have a good sort of area where I'd say I'm committing to the corner. Maybe about a car length or so before the curbing here on the outside, I'm starting to turn really aggressively to the left hand side. And then the goal would be to hit the curb here quite aggressively. In this case here, about half the car width should be over the curbing here. Let's quickly check it from the outside as soon as it loads. And now it has loaded. Basically, half of the car should be over the curbing here, so center line of the car should be pretty much between the white line and the beginning of the blue and yellow curbing. Don't be afraid of this one here. If you clip it with enough speed, the car will jump so high that it only lands when the rear tire is basically hovering above the curbing again. If you drive too slow, however, the car might jump a little bit and it will fall down with the left rear tire before the curb is basically beneath it. If that happens, the car will bounce really badly and you will have a hard time, but if you do it with enough speed, it's actually fine. And from this point onwards, I'm already a little bit on the throttle, just maintaining speed and sort of adjusting the trajectory of the car a little bit with it. And then the right side curbing here can also be used a little bit, not to the full width. You definitely want to avoid the red sausage, but the normal blue and yellow curbing can be used quite safely. And from this point onwards then, just unwind the steering wheel, go towards full throttle and track out all the way here. Just make sure that you don't hit the gravel. If you hit the gravel, that will slow you down, and it's especially painful if you're on for a really good lap and then you ruin it by just clipping the gravel a little bit and losing 2/10. That's highly annoying, so be careful that this doesn't happen to you. And from that point onwards, it's a very short run towards the start-finish line. Start-finish line is quite early on the straight here, and then that is a lap around Le Mans. For this week's tutorial. Should you have any questions or feedback regarding this tutorial, regarding the setups, or regarding the data pack in general, feel free to click the send feedback button here in the data pack or ask on the LMDH channel on the VRS Discord. Alternatively,
Alright. We are done with the Le Mans tutorial, so we can drop the volume back down. We're working on the last turn. All right, let's work on this last section. Then we'll be able to get some full laps in, hopefully at a much better time. Whoa, that shit comes up quick.
Okay, Mikey, we need to watch these track limits.
Nope. Yep. Attack the curbs better. Nope. Better. That was okay. Whoa.
limits. This lap will be deleted.
One more. Full lap, let's go.
Watch the track limits. Please, Mikey.
.438. That was your fastest lap of the session.
Let's do a lap with no incidents.
temperature has fallen. It's now 25 Celsius.
.86.
You've just done a 3:41.9. That's your best lap in the session. Sector 1 time is good. First lap won't count. You've got the track.
Oh, sausage.
41.19. New fastest lap for you. They say you cut the course. You'll have to slow down and give up the time gained.
Okay. It's about that time of the day. So far, I've learned what to do on this track. We're going to come back. We're going to try the VRS setup. And the other setups we have. But for now, we're going to take a break. The stream's been live for 5.5 hours. I'm just going to go ahead and close up the stream for now. And I'll start the stream again when we come back. Folks, thank you for watching me learn Le Mans. And when I come back this evening, we're going to practice Le Mans some more. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next time here at the Bear Cave. Silly Old Bear, signing off.